Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mostly NBA podcast. This is episode 5, and I'm Michael Higgins.
And I'm Matt LeVay.
And we are alone today. We have Jacob and Cam sitting this one out. They had other duties to get to. So me and Matt are going to try to bring you all the news that you need in the NBA and elsewhere around sports. And I wanted to get right into it, just sort of talking about the Eastern Conference leading into the All-Star break. I know we had an episode sort of looking at the big stories player-wise, the big stories team-wise, like how things were shaping up headed into the All-Star break, which is, I believe, this coming weekend or next week.
This weekend, yeah.
Yeah, so that should be fun. But I think a couple things that we missed out on that have certainly become bigger topics over the last few weeks are the rise of that second tier in the East. You have Cleveland leading the pack, but not by much. Followed pretty closely behind by Boston, Washington, Atlanta, and Toronto. 4 teams that are kind of all within several games of each other and all playing very competitive basketball, looking at different situations, some trying to acquire players, some sort of dumping players, but staying competitive. And that's kind of what we've seen in the East, and I'm not quite sure what to think of it. It's definitely exciting. I'm just not quite sure who to expect to come out of there. I think Boston's been really hot lately. Isaiah Thomas, I think, as I mentioned last episode, has just been playing great, much better than he has in his career. And he's showing that he's a true star in the NBA, a true star of a team that you can rely on down the stretch in a game, and hopefully for Boston fans in a playoff series. I think Washington has completely turned around and become a threat in the East that they definitely weren't just the first half of the season. And I don't know what that was due to, but John Wall, Otto Porter, Bradley Beal starting to really click, and Washington has become a very competitive team and one that teams are not happy to see on a nightly basis. Getting into Atlanta, that's kind of the team I was referring to. They've lost some faces there, but they've kind of stayed afloat. They've kind of learned how to make it work. There were a lot of rumors flying that they were trying to dump Paul Millsap after the Kyle Korver trade, but Paul Millsap has hung around. Dwight Howard is quietly having a pretty good season. And, Atlanta continues to stay in that top half of the East. And then a little bit more surprising, Toronto has seen themselves as high as 2 in the East, the 2 seed this year. And depending on how the season started, I don't think they were ever 1, but I think they were 2 for a while. They've dropped down to that 5th seed in the East, but certainly, 2, 3, and 4 still in reach because of how close the East has been. But Toronto, trying to stay afloat. They just traded Terrence Ross and a future first-round pick, I believe a 2017 first-round draft pick to the Orlando Magic for Serge Ibaka, get some more size inside there, some size that they actually lost to the Magic and Bismack Biyombo over the offseason. So a lot of teams are vying for those first 3, 4 seeds in the East because I think they're all attainable right now. I think Cleveland, losing J.R. Smith and now just recently losing Kevin Love after a knee scope that'll keep him out for 6 weeks. I think that's something that they don't exactly have locked down. They've got to bring it every night to make sure that they stay above these teams that are coming for them. So I think that the East is kind of in a very good kind of disarray. And, heading into the All-Star break, it'll be fun to see how these teams pick it up going into the second half. And then looking towards the bottom of the East, you've got Indiana, a team that I definitely thought was going to be competitive. They were actually my dark horse seed. My dark horse 2 seed pick in the beginning of the year. They certainly haven't been that competitive, but I think any team that has Paul George, Jeff Teague, and Miles Turner, is definitely a force to be reckoned with. So I think they have a hold on their playoff spot. Getting below that, you get into Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee. Not much there. I mean, Chicago's trying to keep it afloat. Kind of a weird team, weird situation. Detroit, I think, is much better than they are playing. They're below 500 right now, and I mean that must be driving Stan Van Gundy just all kinds of nuts. But I think he's gonna. I just see them getting hotter. I see them ending the season on a strong note, and I really don't see them in that 8th seed again. I was saying to Matt before the show, actually, last year when they were at that 8th seed in the playoffs, it seemed like they were an 8 seed that was on the rise, a team that was really starting to get it together, and these next few years would be, up in that 3 to 6 range. And so Detroit at the 8 right now is a little weird to me. I think, like I said, I think they turn it on getting towards the end of the season. I think they pass up Chicago. I think they have a good chance of passing up Indiana as well. But, the teams that are kind of right out of that playoff push, the Milwaukees, the Charlottes, I don't think there's much going there. I don't think there's much that they can lean on. I think any chance that Milwaukee had might have gone out the window with Jabari Parker tearing his ACL for a second time. So I just think the East is kind of past Indiana. I think it's pretty pretty bad, honestly. But to have 6 teams, that are really truly competitive, I think is good for that conference, especially in years past where they've only had like 3. So I don't know, Matt. I don't know if you have any thoughts in the East. It pretty much is what it is. At the bottom of the conference, at least, the top, like I said, is sort of mashed up, and we'll see how that happens, and that's pretty exciting. But I mean, yeah, the bottom's pretty boring. So I don't know what you think about that second half of the East.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like these teams, I guess you can look at on the bubble right now. You touched on Milwaukee. That was just a really, really obviously just devastating loss for them. Losing Jabari Parker, a scorer and a playmaker like him, is just going to really put a dent in their season. Obviously, right now as a Heat fan, we just went through a pretty interesting time for us, huh? 13-game win streak, but finally came to an end about a week ago or so with Philadelphia defeating us. Obviously, out of all the teams that could beat us to end a 13-game winning streak, of course, it would be the 76ers. But hey, we'll take a 13-game streak anytime. Yeah, Mike, I mean, looking at the bottom right now of the Eastern Conference, as far as, I guess, the team that's really the hottest right now, it's undoubtedly been, no pun intended on this one, the hottest team has definitely been the Heat so far. They went on that huge 13-game win streak. Things were just really clicking for them. Dion Waiters and Goran Dragic were just playing really, really good basketball for them. And they're a team that's certainly on the rise right now. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue just because they still don't have that dominant playmaker. And to be honest, in order to sustain, consistency in this league, consistently winning, night after night, throughout the whole entire course of a season, they're going to need, that dominant playmaker. You have guys on teams like this, like Cleveland, LeBron, look throughout the league, you have playmakers. Miami still, though, just doesn't have that playmaker, and I just don't know how far they're going to continue to keep this up, really.
Yeah, what you were saying about, Miami with the playmaker, I think they've sort of been trying to rely on guys that are not playmakers, and that got them through that streak. And because of that, it actually has gotten them into the playoff discussion. But, I think you're right. I think in either of these conferences, when you're vying for one of those last spots and you're coming into the playoffs facing one of those top teams, unless you have a guy to rely on, you don't really have much hope to rely on. Other than that, not much change in the NBA in the last few weeks. The West has remained pretty stable, what with Golden State and San Antonio kind of leading that pack. So we'll kind of see how the bottom of that conference shakes out eventually. But yeah, it's been pretty unchanging for most of the season.
No doubt about that, Mike. I mean, honestly, just the story of the year in the Western Conference is still just the same 2 teams repeatedly doing their thing. Obviously, Golden State's just kicking butt right now. And then San Antonio, another interesting stat for the Spurs. We always talk about their greatness and their stability year after year, but this marks their 20th consecutive winning season. How crazy is that? I mean, to have that kind of consistently for that many years. I mean,
that's unbelievable. I think that's just a big testament to Greg Popovich and just the ownership of that organization. They found a way to run their team. They found a way to run that organization in a winning way. They built a culture there, and just the fact that it's still there after 20 years is just amazing, and it's something that definitely should be celebrated. I don't think even just within the NBA. I think across all sports, because I've said this before. I think the Spurs, along with like the Cardinals in the MLB, I think those are some of the best run franchises in sports right now. So I think that's a great stat, but honestly, not even that surprising because they've come to kind of just go along with the word greatness. Like, you think greatness, you think the Spurs, you think that dynasty, and just the fact that a lot of those players have started to move on and they've still continued their success and continue to even build in a different direction, but still maintain, how good they've been is just amazing. All right, we've reached the segment of the show where the mostly comes in. We're going to talk about other sports right now. A little bit old news, but that Super Bowl was definitely crazy. I don't think any of us were right. I think we all picked. Oh no, we did pick the Patriots.
We picked the Patriots, but we certainly
not like that.
Not like that. Definitely not like that.
Definitely a Super Bowl for the ages. One of the best football games I've ever seen. I was not thrilled with the outcome, but if they were gonna win, might as well do it in the most legendary way ever. Like, it was honestly awesome. I'm glad that it happened in that way, where we got such a great game and such a classic Super Bowl. I'm very happy in these last few days, especially because baseball has returned. Spring training pitchers and catchers have reported, and actually a lot of full squads have unofficially reported to camp and started doing workouts. And it's just baseball starting in the spring is always just such like a renewing feeling for me. To have something like that every day, because it is an everyday sport. You got things going on every day in baseball across the MLB. You always have games. In spring training, it's just excitement. Everybody's excited, even if you're a team that you're not going to be that great. There's always just some sort of hope. When spring comes around. So great to have baseball back, and we'll definitely be talking about that as it gets closer to opening day and as we get into the season. But right now, we're going to look at college basketball. That's, outside of the NBA, that's pretty much the other sport that's in season right now. Sorry to the NHL. Sorry to Cam.
Sorry, Cam.
But, I think college basketball has been, really, really exciting this year. There's not really that one team that is dominant. There's not really that one team that everybody expects to win a championship. So I think it's kind of wide open. So Matt, I know you watch a lot of college basketball. What do you think about sort of how that's shaping up with the top 10 or 15 or so teams?
Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, just like you kind of touched on, college basketball, what I love about it the most is it's so wide open. I mean, countless times this year, week after week, we've had teams where, multiple top 10 teams, even multiple top 5 teams have gone down so far this year. Honestly, personally, for me, a team that is really on the rise lately, and I know it, kind of seems redundant, but the Duke Blue Devils, they just started out really hot, obviously, and they just went on that span where things weren't clicking. Coach K went out, and just things started to go south, but they're on a track right now, just really playing good basketball right now. Grayson Allen has gotten his head on, a little bit better, right? No more tripping incidents as of late, so they're playing really good ball. As far as Gonzaga goes at number 1 right now, it's kind of tough to tell. I haven't watched too much of them, honestly, per se. I'm not sure a lot of people have, even when they are at the number 1 spot right now. But there's no denying, though, they have beaten, quality teams this year. St. Mary's, our own, Florida Gators this year. And they're certainly a team to look out for. I just don't know. I still feel like Gonzaga, even though it's a different team this year, just year after year, we always talk about them. We always talk about, how hyped they are as it comes tourney time, but then they end up losing, their second round or Sweet 16. So who knows? But it's their chance this year. They're certainly on a roll, and see if they can turn things around this year come tournament time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on Gonzaga. I think that they're an interesting case because of the conference they play in. And like you said, a lot of people probably haven't seen them this year. We were able to watch them play against Florida. And my takeaway is from that game, certainly they've gotten better since then. That was so early in the season. But they definitely looked like a beatable team. They're very dangerous. But you said it before, and people always say this about Gonzaga. Once they hit the tournament, a lot of times they become, a team that even ranked 1, 2, 3 is a team that is very vulnerable to upsets, I believe. And I think that is due to their scheduling during the regular season. You run into teams that are, even ranked as low as, 6 and 7 that come from very good conferences and have the experience of playing 2 times a week against, I don't want to say better competition, but I want to say more intense competition for a longer period of time. Gonzaga is definitely the class of the WCC, and St. Mary's is up there as well. But like we said, they played and beat St. Mary's. So, but yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see come tournament time. I don't think they're going to win a national championship. I wouldn't pick Gonzaga. Probably wouldn't even pick them for the Final Four. But hey, I mean, I guess we'll have to see. They're undefeated as of right now. Let's see how long they can keep that going. Probably by the time this episode comes out, they'll have lost. Now that I said that, but I think the teams that are maybe not most exciting but most dangerous in the top 10 right now, I look at teams like Kansas and UCLA. Those teams that can score in such high volumes and have really exciting playmakers. I think Josh Jackson is one of the most exciting ones in college basketball right now for Kansas. He can take over pretty quickly, and for somebody who has the kind of lanky build that Jackson has, that definitely surprised me the first time I saw him play, even though, he was, such a highly touted recruit and such a big freshman in college basketball. But anyway, Kansas, yeah, I think that they're very scary. UCLA, the same way. There's been a lot of good basketball played in the Pac-12 this year, and UCLA and Oregon seem to be the teams that have all the pieces put together and are ready to make that push come March. So definitely something that we'll keep tabs on, getting closer to the tournament. We've got the last few weeks of conference regular season play coming up before the conference tournaments. Before, about a month from now, we turn it over to, in my opinion, the best few weeks in sports, the NCAA tournament. I mean, March Madness. It doesn't really get much better than that. Anybody has a chance. You play 40 minutes of basketball, and if you have an off day, you have an off day, and you're out. I just think it's one of the best, if not the best, playoff in sports. And it always gets me very excited, especially around now when things are starting to really pick up and get going. Teams really have to prove themselves. So, like I said, definitely something we'll monitor, something we'll keep tabs on, and we'll be talking about it a lot more coming up in the future.
And that's all we got for you guys today here on the Mostly NBA podcast. We look forward to getting Cam and Jake back for our next episode. But on behalf of Michael Higgins, I'm Matt LeVay. Thanks for joining us.